Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University. I'm Jennifer Bernardi, the Executive Director of the Ford Hall Forum, and I am pleased to present to you our last forum of this season, An Actor and a Gentleman with Mr. Louis Gossett, Jr. The Ford Hall Forum is proud to be the nation's oldest continuously operating free public lecture series. I want to thank you for participating in this century-old program to advance freedom of speech and an informed citizenry through public discussion. We appreciate our generous sponsors in the Boston community, including, but not limited to, the Lowell Institute, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and our partners at Suffolk University, which serves as the forum's home base. We also thank our members, without whom we would not be able to put on this fantastic free public forum. This event is being video recorded and will be available on iTunes and WGBH Forum. If you're sharing a comment or a question, please speak into one of the two microphones there so that we may capture your voice on video. By speaking, you're giving the Ford Hall Forum permission to record you. And as I have now done, would you please turn off your cell phones? Before we begin the conversation, we're going to have a fantastic video about Mr. Louis Gossett Jr.'s career. So if we could start that up right now. Terrific, thanks.
The winner is Louis Gossett Jr. It's no use, because it's all gone. I tried to get my kid to come up here to share this with me, but there are some special people I would like to share this with. Specifically, tomorrow is the 17th anniversary of my relationship with my one agent, Mr. Ed Bondi. They say marriages don't last. I've got spirits that died from me. Starting from a great-grandmother who died at the age of 117, and my mom and dad, who I know are watching, and my cousin Yvonne, thank you. You make everything fall into place. And all you other four guys, this is ours. Thank you.
Louis Gossett Jr. is one of the leading black voices in American cinema. Born May 27, 1936 in Brooklyn, New York, Lou was raised in the multicultural section of Sheepshead Bay and attended Abraham Lincoln High School. A promising athlete, Louis excelled in basketball and baseball, playing against Sandy Koufax and Connie Hawkins. While in high school, a leg injury sidelined him from athletics. Under the advice of his English teacher, Lou went to an open audition for the Broadway production of Take a Giant Step. Beating out 400 candidates, Lou landed a role that won him the Donaldson Award for Best Newcomer. After attending NYU on a basketball scholarship, Louis was drafted by the New York Knicks. Instead of going pro, though, Lou took a giant step towards a promising acting career. Louis's work soon flourished. His work in the stage and film versions of Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun led to numerous appearances on television and in film. The 1960s and 70s won him critical acclaim in The Landlord, The Skin Game with James Garner, George Cukor's Travels with My Aunt, the film adaptation of the Tony Award-winning drama The River Niger, as well as a riveting performance as a drug-dealing cutthroat in the deep end. Other than that. My name is only Bondi Brown, a jeweler by trade, by avocation, a collector of rare and unusual glass. You see, the government here
has rather strict rules about diving. Legally, you cannot stick anything from your dive unless you first offer to sell it to the government on a decline. Unfortunately, the government rarely ever does decline, and even more rarely offers premium prices.
The culmination of his work in the 1970s led to an Emmy for his portrayal of Fiddler in Roots.
But you care what that white man call you? You say Toby. But you care. You know who you be? Good. That's who you always be. Go tuck your tail. There could be another day. You hear me? There could be another day.
In 1982, Lewis's role as a tough by-the-book drill sergeant in An Officer and a Gentleman.
Hell no, sir.
Where you from, boy?
Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, sir.
Ah,
Only two things come out of Oklahoma.
which one of you, boy? I don't see no horn.
No, sir.
Lewis made numerous screen and television appearances following his
I
Oscar win.
want your T-O-R. It's gonna quit. Spell it. T-O-R. It's gonna quit. Yeah, and you can be free. No, sir. T-O-R. I ain't gonna quit. Right, then you can forget it. You're out. Don't you do it. Don't you. I got nowhere else to go. I got nowhere else to go. I got nothing else. I got nothing else. All right, now. On your feet.
Most notably, the biopic movies Don't Look Back, the story of Leroy Satchel Paige and as Egyptian President Anwar Sadat in Sadat.
I killed you. No more. No more. I killed you.
In 1985, the sci-fi adventure Enemy-Mine won him kudos.
Jerry, what are you? This book must be given to the people. I will become the master. I am not worthy, but there is no one else here.
That same year began the action-adventure series Iron Eagle, introducing him to a new generation of fans.
You really believe that the nonsense you're saying? Look at me when I talk to you! Look, let me clue you in something right now. God damn it, you better talk to me like this. I'm not gonna start now.
Still growing strong, who's trend-setting, all-head, and over 6'4" physique served him well. He's played a down-out boxer in Big Sound and a heroic headmaster in Toy Soldier, as well as a hard-nosed investigator in the popular series The Inspectors.
You lost faith in me. It was a cash fight. You're the one that kept drilling me. Half the money is in the acting. $92,000. $92,000. I know you're here to try to pitch me on something, but I'm off the con and I'm out complete forever, huh?
A recipient of multiple Golden Globes, Emmys, and People's Choice Awards, his performances connect him with fans on the global
What do you mean, all right? I mean, if you're not interested, you're not interested.
Lewis's well-thought-out and nuanced performances gave credibility to socially themed projects such as To Dance with Olivia in the critically acclaimed Jasper, Texas.
Most of them disqualified themselves because they don't believe in the death penalty.
That's not exactly a surprise, not the way it's been used against us.
It won't help if we get an all-white jury. It won't look good. It won't look good at all.
Currently, Lou has become the new lead on the popular science fiction series Stargate SG-1. Presently, Lou is in the process of developing a non-profit foundation aimed at creating entertainment that brings awareness and education to issues such as racism, ignorance, and societal apathy. After 52 years in the business, his best work is yet to come.
And now, if our speaker and moderator would like to take their seats, allow me the pleasure of introducing our moderator for the evening, Phyllis Karas. Phyllis Karas is the co-author of An Actor and a Gentleman with Lou Gossett Jr. Karas also co-authored The Onassis Women, an eyewitness account, with Aristotle Onassis's private secretary, Kiki Ferrudi Moutsatsos. Her other published works include Life Worth Living and the young adult novels The Hate Crime, Crybaby, For Lucky's Sake, and Spellbound. Karas has co-authored 2 thrillers on Whitey Bulger and the South Boston Irish Mob, the New York Times bestseller, Brutal, The Untold Story of My Life Inside Whitey Bulger's Irish Mob, and more recently, Street Soldier, My Life as an Enforcer for Whitey Bulger and the Boston Irish Mob. An Actor and a Gentleman is her 9th book. She's a stringer for People magazine and an adjunct professor at Boston University School of Journalism. Please help me welcome our moderator, Phyllis Karas.
Thank you, Jennifer. It is now my deepest pleasure to introduce a man whose story has moved me deeply. A man who has left the sunny shores of Malibu for the chilly winds of Boston, so he can tell you in person what it was like to be an African-American kid on the streets of Brooklyn in the 50s, a Broadway star at age 15, an NYU basketball player recruited by the Knicks at age 21, a member of the Actors Studio with Jimmy Dean and Marilyn Monroe and Steve McQueen at 25, a single father at 30, the recipient of an Emmy for Roots at age 41, an Academy Award winner at age 44, and a star in enough movies and plays and television shows to fill at least 2 more books. And through everything, the good times and the not so good times. Above all else, a beautiful man who cares deeply about the world and the children above all else. Please welcome my very good friend, Louis Gossett Jr.
Thank you.
So, there were so many stories in the book, it's hard to just try to pick out a few. But I think what moved me so much at the very beginning was that incredible first experience when you came to when you came to Hollywood
Oh, boy, yeah.
to film the TV movie of the week. Could you tell the audience a little bit about that experience?
Well, I have to preface it with the way I was raised after the Depression in Brooklyn. And so a lot of us can tell that story in Brooklyn, the Barbra Streisands and the Neil Simons and the Harvey Keitels. We all have the same story of there was getting ready to be a purge after the Depression about everybody was starting unions and they were accused of being left-wing. The actor studio had to run, you know, and it was the John Garfields and the Marlon Brandos. We all ran and they reformed the actor studio. But there was a man from Tennessee, it was Senator Estes Kefauver. That was before McCarthy. So the intellectual cream of the crop out of Boston and out of everywhere had to run. And had to run to somebody who had agreed with their politics, and that was William Jansen of the Board of Education in New York City. So we got the benefit of some of the finest professors, the Phyllis Karases, and all of the people that came to New York City, and they were sent to the boondocks. So I was raised with those college professors across the country. Right after the Depression, there was an international feeling, we're all poor. And so I had college professors at 6th grade and 7th grade, they lived in the neighborhood. And of course, the results of the neighborhoods, the Bensonhursts, the Bay Ridges, the Coney Islands, the Brighton Beaches, the Canarsies, we were a melting pot. We learned how to play stickball in the street with a broomstick and hit a home run by hitting 3 sewers and stoop ball, and the girls had potsy, and we really occupied ourselves. And before the cell phone, there were the middle-aged ladies who watched us like a hawk so that we couldn't go to bed. So we were tight. And they went, if my parents didn't get home in time, then I had a choice of gefilte fish, lasagna, corned beef and cabbage, menudo. It depended on who got home in time. And we were raised that way. That was the neighborhood. We were tight, thick as thieves. I often wondered how come I could identify with Hopalong Cassidy or Captain Marvel, but it didn't matter to us. So on Sunday, the guys would say, well, you play Superman Sunday. So I played Superman on Sunday, Hopalong Cassidy on Wednesday. I didn't know, he didn't look like me, but I could be Hopalong Cassidy just like anybody else. So that foundation lasted all the way through cool school. I was the president of junior high school, the president of high school, the captain of the team, a good student, because I had no idea that the color of my skin was a deterrent. That's what I was taught. And I was free of that, and I felt very wonderful. And of course, Jackie Robinson came, and I cheered him on, but there was just no such thing as impossible. It was very insolent, very supportive. I was on the shoulders of everybody there. They took me to Broadway. I had not seen a play, and they told me, you could do this. And so all the things I thought was impossible became possible. And my mind was open wider and wider, my eyes were wide. It was a wonderful world, Broadway. And so one of the men from New York went to Universal Studios, Lou Wasserman, you've read about him, and created Universal Studios. And they started doing the movies of the week at Universal Studios. The very first one was called Companions in Nightmare. And some of those actors I've worked with in the theater and television in New York, Melvin Douglas and Gid Young, and Ann Baxter, Donna Winter, and William Redfield and Leslie Nielsen, and me. Yes, they sent me in a first class, TWA. There was still the propellers. I can still hear the propellers tonight. All the time. So they fed me well. They treated me like a king. I landed in Los Angeles, and the limousine came out to the airplane. And I got in a limousine. I said, boy, this life's pretty good. Boy, this is pretty good. Yeah, I'm in LA there. Well, this is 1968. So they took me in a limousine to the Beverly Hills Hotel. And the bungalow they gave me, the President of the United States was in the same bungalow. So it was the best bungalow, and they treated me like a king. And there's a notice, your rental car is waiting at Hertz Rent-A-Car. Now, if you know Los Angeles, Hertz Rent-A-Car is on Creston Heights and Sunset. It takes approximately 20 minutes to get down Sunset to the Beverly Hills Hotel. It took me 4.5 hours to get from Crescent Heights to the Beverly Hills Hotel, because every policeman stopped me, looking at me dumbfounded. What is it? It was a white Fairlane 500 with a red interior, And I had Sam Cooke's music on. And I had, hey, what, but that, you know, I come from New York, I don't know. And these guys, every one of them looked like Rod Steiger from Heat of the Night. They just was flabbergasted. What do you think? Get out. I said, what's the matter? What do you realize? Put the top down. Oh, they were flabbergasted. And every 15 yards, I'd have to stop again, and again, and again. It got monotonous after a while because I met every member of the LAPD and the Beverly Hills Police Department. I said, oh, yeah, I know I answered to the description, right? Ha, 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 ha. But they weren't. So finally, after 4.5 hours, I just flabbergasted. I don't know what that was about. I know now what it was about. Well, anyway, I go to the hotel and I tell everybody what happened. Don't bother with those guys. Very much like L.A. Confidential, if you saw that film. That's how the police were. So now I'm eating dinner. I had prime rib, Yorkshire pudding. I never had Yorkshire pudding, and blood pudding they have in England. And of course a baked potato with sour cream and chives, and some wonderful string beans, and strawberry shortcake, and just because of nostalgia, I had a New York milkshake. But I'm full. So I decided, well, I've got this map of movie stars' homes. So I got a little sweater on and go out and looked at movie stars' homes around Sunset and Benedict Canyon. And here comes the other guy saying, what do you think you're doing? Rod Steiger's back again. He worked overtime. Before you know it, I'm handcuffed to a tree. I'm holding a tree like this. So I can learn a lesson not to walk in Beverly Hills after 9 o'clock. So 3 hours later, they finally let me go. And I had to get rid of my underwear, clothes, and I went back in shock. So I called my mother and father. My father says, you stay right there, I'll be right there. Now he's in Coney Island. My mother says, we're coming to get you. And they were really scared because their experience, they knew from being from Georgia and South Carolina is different than mine. And they made sure that I never suffered those indignities. So in protecting me, I didn't know, was not prepared at that time. And so the next morning, I called my friend Ed Bondi, who you saw on the screen, what happened. And he said, we'll get an apology. Well, what are you going to do? I said, I may as well go to work. He says, what I expect you to do. Go to work and show it in front of that camera, which is what I've done all my career. And it took another hour to get through the gates because they didn't understand. Explanation. Those blue-collar workers are descendants from the people who worked in the World War II factories that made the munitions and the airplanes, and they came from Texas and Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia and Arkansas. And that's the blue collars, the police. Of course, they couldn't have known about me. I was either an athlete or a pimp. But they didn't know that I was a movie star because they had had an experience. It just didn't fit their image for generations. Nobody this color can act this way or have anything like that. So there's a lesson there. Maybe we have problems today because of generations of thinking one way. On everybody's side, things used to be one way. And if you believe in God or Buddha or Allah, things are going to change whether we like it or not. So I believe that if we have to do something to our children, we should plant in our children that there really is no such thing as possible. What happened in Coney Island was the right way to be in the first place. There's been exploitation, all kinds of people who, the extremes are fighting the extremes. But it's still the fact that we need one another to make this world livable. It's still the fact that the number one commodity on the planet is our children, and not oil or gold or any munitions. It's still a fact that we can't fix the world without dropping the other agendas. So that feeling from the time in Hollywood and Beverly Hills makes me think today that we're not going to survive unless we drop all the racists and enmity, because the number one problem is that the planet is dying. So we need to do something about that. We need to drop all the other agendas to do it. Otherwise, we're like in a 747 airplane, all of us. It's at 30,000 feet, and it's plummeting to the ground, and everybody inside of the plane is fighting over who's going to be in first class. That's what it seems like. Anyway, thank you.
Well, on a much lighter note, getting back to the Actors Studio, which was such wonderful experiences for you as a young kid. Can you tell us what it was like working with Steve McQueen and Marty Landau, and especially Marilyn Monroe?
Oh, Marilyn Monroe. Does anybody ever have, what do they call it, olfactory problems, where you have a smell or a sound that makes you think sexually? Marilyn Monroe used to use her husband's Lifebuoy soap. She used to wear his shirts and flip-flops and jeans and show up. You knew she was coming a half hour before she got there. If she had stayed with Arthur Miller, she probably had 3 or 4 Oscars by now, because she was turning into quite an actress. But I don't know, for some reason, she would sit this close to me. And the Lifebuoy soap would hit under my nose, and I'd have to cross my legs and have to leave and come back, and she'd, where are you going? And I'm sitting like this. So finally, I'm living in a 2nd Street on the Lower East Side, and the phone rings. And I said, hello. She says, hello, Louis. I said, yeah, who's this? This is Marilyn. Marilyn from Class. And I would like very much to do the love scene from the Rose Tattoo, you know, with the young people. There was absolutely no way in the world that I could have done a line in a love scene with Marilyn Monroe, because that Lifebuoy soap got in the way. And I would have been embarrassed. So Marty Landau did the scene. And I'm so glad she left, because I could not concentrate. I don't know if you guys could identify with the one woman in your life, whether a child, you just can't be in the room. I could not be in the room with Marilyn Monroe. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Maybe you could, not me.
Oh, and tell us, why would you like to see Paul Newman again?
Oh, Paul Newman. Well, Paul Newman was in Sweet Bird of Youth, and we was in A Raisin in the Sun. And Wednesdays and Saturdays, we'd play poker underneath. And they would show their muscles, Sidney and Paul, because they had all the money. They'd raise us out. So finally, I got 4 jacks. Sidney had 4 10s, and Paul Newman had 4 9s. And it was a pile of money, and it was $375 short. And Paul Newman said, I'll pay you next week. He never gave me that $300. I'm waiting. Well, one day, we're going to be hopefully up there in heaven. I say, hey, Paul, you owe me money.
And do tell us about the little pygmy that almost ended the career of Louis Gossett.
Now, this is the first feature I played, 19, 20 years old. And it's in Tanzania, Africa. So first we did get in Nairobi. And Nairobi and Tanzania was having the first time they had national television. So impressive television was that Mrs. Jomo Kenyatta got rid of her ceremonial robes and started looking just like Lucille Ball with her hairdo and all that. They made her stop that and go back to her ceremonial robes. But that was very impressive. They had Milton Berle, they had You Are There, Goodyear Filco, and I'd done The Nurses. The Nurses was an early television series. And I played a juvenile delinquent who got shot to the stomach. And at the end, I go to run, and all the stitches break, and I die. Then I fade out, I'm at Nairobi airport, and people are doing double takes. And they're talking about me, and I get to the Nairobi Hilton. I say, he's here. I said, what do you mean he's here? Who do you think I am? They had seen me die in The Nurses, and they wanted me to open my shirt. So I opened my shirt. They said, how did you do that? So that's how impressive television was. So now we're doing the film The Bush Baby in Tanzania. And John Trent, God rest his soul, was one of these exciting directors. He wanted reality. So there's a scene where myself and a little girl are running from the police because they think I've kidnapped her, and a helicopter comes, and that almost kills me. I'll tell you about that later, maybe. And then there's a fight between a pygmy and myself. They had no actors who were pygmies in Tanzania, so they had to get a pygmy. And the pygmies, you keep out of this. And the pygmies, they were professional poachers. They had about this area behind an elephant's ear that would bring an elephant down with a poison arrow. Poison arrow is about this big. And they were very excellent sharpshooters. And so they had to get a poacher, a pygmy, about this big. And he doesn't have any idea what a movie is. They didn't tell him. So he's sitting there, looking at me with red eyes, chewing whatever he's chewing like this. And the director's there. And then there's a man who's translating from English to Swahili. And then there's a man who's translating from Swahili to the Pygmy language. So the director says, okay, here's the scene. Mr. Gossett's coming through the bush, and you are the Pygmy, you see him. So then when you see him, you have to grab your arrow, and you have to point it, and before you can get that arrow out, Mr. Gossett is run across, grab the arrow, and throw it away, and you go in the jungle like this, and then you come up with a knife, and you throw the knife away, and you scurry away into the bush. So the guy says, okay. Como que depois de você der mana? Isso que precisa muito da nena. E como te tinha muito que chega na depois. Porque de muito tempo não mais nena. Como te quer? Como continua muito da lá. So the guy is going to translate it to the pygmy. He says, "You want me to tell them that?" He says, "Yes, okay." Koi munde no mo da ya ke po da. Koi ke ba tiro mo di hübete da. You come at here, no, you got good job, you got botana. And the pygmy said, ah, 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 ah. What did he say? The pygmy said, no way. Nobody is going to beat me with this arrow or this knife and take it away from me. He laughed for a long time and says, okay, calm down. Okay. Mr. Gossett is an athlete. So here's what we're going to do. When I say go, Mr. Gossett is going to see if he can do it. We're going to put the bow and arrow down over there. So before the go got to O, the pygmy was like, and the arrow was pointing right at my nose. And it was like a long time in turning. He went and said, ah, ha, 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 ha. No way. Now the truth is on the tip of that arrow was that curare that kills elephants. That's how close it came. But now, for the rest of that time, he was the king of the city. Every time I came out of the hotel, he was with his entourage. So finally he did a movie for me as a result of being friends. But he had never forgotten that he had the upper hand. He really could have killed me. But that poison on the tip of the arrow.
Oh, thank God. We would not be here today. I also remember an experience you had filming Cowboy in Africa one very chilly afternoon at the Disney Ranch. Can you tell that?
Well, there's another one that's about Cowboy. Remember, how many people remember Cowboy in Africa?
Cowboy in Africa?
It was Dating Yourself guy.
Yeah.
Well, Cowboy in Africa was one of the early series about a cowboy and his Indian sidekick coming to Africa to teach the Africans how to handle cattle. It was Chuck Norris, Chuck Connors, and his partner. And I played a chief of the district. Animal husbandry was the subject. And so the guy, he gave me a tribute, and he gave me a page-and-a-half monologue to explain why they had to go home and I could handle these cattle myself. And we rehearsed it in the daytime, and it was about 75 degrees, and I was just doing all kinds of innuendos with the scene, and it was wonderful. By the time we got to the scene, it was 32 degrees. So now I'm cold and I got goose pimples going on, so I just, and my friend, he's looking like Kilroy off my shoulder, and I'm saying why, and I'm doing it very well, and then finally Chuck says, cut this out, this is too cold. I said, my man Chuck, he knows we have to dress well. So he gets off his horse, and he goes to a dressing room and comes out with an alpaca coat, and his scarves, his gloves, and a hat, and gets back out and says, I'm ready. I said, well, wait a minute, all I have is a loincloth here and metal jewelry, and you're in my country, and you're dressed better than I am in my country. That's not going to look good. So the director looked at him and said, action. I said, wait a minute. This is a number one show. Maybe I should wear one of those cow couplets, I cover myself and I do it. And so it looks like I know what I'm doing. And the director said, action. I said, well, wait a minute. Do you have any idea what the country's going to see when you see this number one show? The man dressed the way he's supposed to be dressed in my country, and I've got goose pimples and I'm shaking. You know what they're going to see. You better stop this. Let's do something about it. And he said, action. So I guess at that particular time, almost the same feeling as when I got handcuffed to a tree. Every word, there was a page and a half of it. It was like hot coals. I did it once, and it was one of the worst days of my show business career. Trying to act with dignity in the cold, with the vapor coming out of my mouth. Trying to be authentic as an African in a #1 series where the cowboy was the hero. It was a tough one. It was a tough one, but we did it.
When you were training for an officer and a gentleman, how did you become Emil Foley? How did they turn you into that?
Well, they told me if I didn't do it right, they'd kill me.
Yeah.
I went down to MCRD near Camp Pendleton, and I spent a month with them, and I did everything but drink the beer and smoke the camels. Excuse me. What'd you put in there? Want that a raw pipe? I spent a month there, and we worked out, and then I brought some with me. And during the rehearsals, the actors would go to giggling. They wouldn't take me seriously. So I had to move away. And when I showed up, I was always that Marine, so the word went back to Hollywood that I was up there losing my mind. But I got the proper reaction.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Thank you.
You have 2 beautiful sons,
Oh, I have 2
Sati
great
and
ones.
Sharon.
All right, now Sati, you saw him with the curly hair. And he's now a filmmaker. And he wouldn't come up to get the Oscar or the Emmy with me, but he's just given me 2 and went on the way children. But the other one, Sharon, was in a committee with Valerie Harper and Jesse Jackson and Casey Kasem and Steve Allen and Linda Evans and all kinds of people like that, with Jesse in Operation Push. And we had the bottom line for every child, and it's quite a while ago, 25 years ago, was, and that's true today, that every city, there are at least 1.5 million children in every major city in America then who are hungry and homeless. And Good Morning America was doing a special, and they went to St. Louis, and we found Ingrid Bergman's daughter, Pia Lindstrom, put a microphone in front of a young man's face, said, if you had a wish, what would it be? And he said he wants some place to stay and something to eat, and that's my second son. But the bottom line is the basics that you teach your children, child, whether they're homeless or crazy or not, that security. When somebody is cold, you make them warm. When they have no shelter, you put them in a shelter. When they're hungry, you feed them. When they're hungry for love, you give them that. And all of a sudden, another person comes out. So that ought to be a key to some of these young people out here who didn't get those basics, and that nobody taught them all those basics. So he's a living example, and now he's a master chef. He's not hungry anymore. And he's given me 4 great grandchildren. So it works. We have to give them a little bit more attention and teach them lessons at a younger age. They'll be better if they get that attention.
He is one beautiful man. They are both beautiful men.
Oh, they're great.
Gorgeous.
They're my buddies.
Can you tell a little bit about how you prepared for the role of Honey Ray Palmer in Dickstown?
Oh, Honey Ray Palmer was 6 hours a day in 3 different gyms between you know what rolfing is? Well, every time I got a pull, he'd take his thumb, my trainer, and go to the spot. That'll bring tears to your eyes. And I had 3 hours in one gym, 2 hours in another, and 3 hours finally in another. So it's Gold's Gym, the Jet Center for the karate and the boxing, and then a stretching stuff every 6 days a week. I was too old for a part, but I didn't want to tell anybody, and I finally did it. But that was quite an ordeal, but it then put me back in shape. The other time that I had to do some training was the training for Enemy-Mine. So how many people saw that? Oh boy, that's all. The Enemy-Mine, I played a character from another planet. 85% water. So, you know. And the first day, we had a different director who was Richard Longcrane, and he chose Iceland to shoot. And in Iceland, when that volcano stopped all the air traffic, we're on that mountain. So now I'm getting a rash in this, serpentine skin. You saw that on the thing, and serpent skin, and there's bladders that go like this, and it was pretty hard to put on. It took hours to put on, but I was getting rash as they're taking it off. So I said, you better get me a a skin doctor. There's no skin doctors in Iceland. So back in the university, they got a dermatologist, a young girl, she was scared to death with a little purse. They didn't tell her anything. So they bring up them out to the dressing room, and I come up with the skin stuff. She says, "Hi, I'm the one with the skin problem." That poor lady had to be caught. Halfway down the mountain, had to catch her, had to tell her there was makeup, you know. And then finally she got in there to fix it, and then she realized there's a black man in there too, and she started having to catch her again. Oh boy.
Tell me, Lou, how was it working with Sammy Davis Jr.?
Sammy Davis was fun.
Golden
Sammy
Boy.
Davis in Golden Boy. That's a privilege, you know. I could not keep up with that man and his rat pack. About 11 o'clock, I was fast asleep. And they'd go around the clock, and I did not know how he did that. They drank, they smoked, they caroused, they danced. Sinatra, Joey, all of those, that rat pack. Great bunch of guys. Come on, Lou, wake up. I was the athlete, you know. I didn't do much, but
But you danced with him.
I danced with him. I had my big feet, my big athletic feet. And he looked at me and said, "No sports here. Take smaller steps." So I learned how to dance with Sammy and sing with Sammy. And I'll never forget being with that man. One of the great ones. Besides Sammy Davis, of course, Michael Jackson. Those are two of the greatest ever. Two of the greatest ever.
How hard was it for you to play the role of Anwar Sadat in Sadat?
Anwar Sadat was pretty easy. Anwar, there was not a lot of footage on Anwar Sadat. There was the Barbara Walters special and the Walter Cronkite special. And a few things when he came off the plane and spoke. But I got some stuff from his speech at the United Nations and his speech when he first went to Israel. And his wife, Jihan, knew that Anwar Sadat had collected African-American memorabilia and films. And part of it, of course, his collection was Roots. So I find they got the part because I played fiddler, so she picked me. So some of those scenes, the scene up there, I don't remember doing. I did it in one take and went home. There was nothing to do. They just closed it as a blimp and we went home. But there's a lot of that stuff. Coming off the plane in Israel, they had a Mexican school teacher that looked just like Golda Meir. And it was so eerie to come off that plane because it looked like Israel. We shot it in Mexico. But it's just, it was a magic experience. He was one of my heroes. My favorite quote for Anwar Sadat, and Barbara Walters doesn't like this, but I say, "Save some questions for Walter, Barbara." She asked other questions. But she said, I didn't say that.
You kind of went into a spell.
Yeah, I went
Took
into a
that
spell.
role.
Yeah, I went into a spell. It was very nice.
Yeah.
It's been a privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to have this almost 60-year career when it's not supposed to have been possible for somebody in my color to have done this. The things, the people that I've met in my life, that's in the book, from Ralph Bunche to Jackie Robinson to Adam Clayton Powell to Lena Horne to Josephine Baker to Paul Robeson, Hazel Scott, you name them, Walter White, James Baldwin, Dr. Martin Luther King, Sammy Davis Jr., you name them, they come in as they come to me. Nelson Mandela, Bishop Desmond Tutu. I come from Brooklyn, you guys. I had to learn how to speak other than with a Jewish accent. They said, you got the part, but you have to get rid of your Jewish accent. I said, what are you talking? I don't have a Jewish accent. I had to get rid of that, and had to get this stuff that I knew nothing about. So I need really to tell everybody that there really is no such thing as impossible. It doesn't matter where we come from. It doesn't matter who we are. We are important. We are important, each and every one of us. We need to do this salvation of this planet together. Racism is like a cancer today. It's a big cancer, and like cancer in the body, it's got to be radiated out. And so you don't fight it right away. You just create a society where it can't live. So that's what the rest of my life is about, in movies and in lifestyle, especially to our children. If you don't put our poisons in them, then they'll be better. Even the crazy ones. But they deserve a better attention span and a better message than they might be getting from television and radios today. They need us to pay attention, whether they're ours or not, so we can get a little better world.
idea when you were doing Roots, what you were doing, that series was going to have the impact that it did on the world?
I have this, they didn't have it, and the network didn't have it. They said, let's bite the bullet and put this on 7 straight days. And what we were doing, we're celebrating with the stuff that we had discussed in the living rooms and closets and kitchens. We knew the story, but we said, well, God rest their soul, you know, we're going to do it. We're going to have the 7 days, and we're going to enjoy the 7 days, and then we're going to go back to normal television. And it stopped the world. It amazed me. It stopped the world, and but a very funny thing happened. After Roots hit and it stopped the world, employment for African American actors went down lower than it had been for 20 years. So that was very funny. Then after I got my Oscar, I didn't get any work. Then after our president won elected, there's another backlash. So maybe it's from the old days. Maybe we should look at one another a little bit better these days, because that's old habits. Something happened from the old days on everybody's side. Maybe we got to get rid of that and look at each other fresh, because we can't survive without one another. Not here in this country anyway.
Just thinking about Sidney Poitier and how wonderful it was when you worked with him in Raisin in the Sun.
Well, Sidney Poitier was a great man, still is. He was so good that we all used to copy him. His walk, his manners. He had a wonderful love affair with a lens. And during A Raisin in the Sun, he was so popular that we had to deflect so he'd get some lunch. So one of us would run out and go left, and half of the fans would go that way. Somebody else would go right, and half of the fans would go that way. And Sidney could slip across the hotel and have some lunch or some dinner. He's one of the highlights of my life, Sidney Poitier. He's a very special man, self-made. Him and Harry Belafonte. Those two men.
If there was one wonderful role left for you to play, what do you want it to be?
I don't know. Let's just don't call me late for dinner. There's some roles that it's missing. We can talk about motion pictures over the last 20, 30 years. We know all about European history, don't we? About the Romans, about the Greeks, about the Prince Arthur, the Vikings. Because it comes out year in, year out. We know those movies, and they come out again and again. And I thought that perhaps when I won an Oscar and an Emmy, maybe I could play Joe Manganiello, maybe. Or maybe the Great Cowboys, or maybe the Zulu civilization, or the I'm going to Ghana for Christmas. Maybe the Ashanti Empire. Those stories and those civilizations are centuries older than what I see on the screen. And maybe we might find something, maybe our kids might be able to identify with upon whose shoulders they stand. One evening, I was doing Tyler Perry's movie, Daddy's Little Girls. And we're sitting there, and I had a book in my hand. And some of these kids who were out in the street, they come up and say, "What are you reading?" So I took the book and I put it behind my back. And I said, "Well, you know about Wyatt Earp?" They said, "Of course we know about Wyatt Earp." Kevin Costner played him, and a couple of people played him. They had this bad black outfits, and they beat the Clintons, and they won. Gunfight, okay. I said, okay. Now, when the West was opened after the Civil War, they had to go and tame these territories, because all the bad men were there. So this judge hired 35 marshals to tame it. And the most successful marshal, and I pulled the book out, was a big black man with a handlebar mustache. It was him. They said, "No." I said, "Yeah." His name was Bass Reeves. His career lasted 35 years, and he was the most successful marshal in the history of the West. And it got very quiet, these tough guys. So Tyler said, "We need you on the set." So I took the book and I went down and came back, and the AD says, "They stole your book." I said, "Yeah, I know." So I can imagine those so-called tough guys in the corner with a flashlight, looking at this book called Black, Red, and Deadly, it's called. You can probably get it right here. How many stories that have not been on that screen? So now you realize there's a direct effect of the absence of our stories on the major screens of television and film. And our kids say, "Wow, we didn't do anything. Let's create our own." And they're immature, they make immature decisions, and 1/3 of their decisions are illegal. So there's a direct effect on the absence of our stories in documentaries, on film, in schools, and what happens to the minds of all children. So it needs to be corrected, so they know upon whose shoulders they stand and what kind of culture. And it's an important one.
I was thinking about Jasper, Texas. That was an incredible role.
Oh, Jasper, Texas is a true story about the
How many know about the story?
anybody know about the story of Jasper, Texas? That's what, just a little while ago, they dragged a black man behind a truck in Jasper, Texas, and the mayor was black. And that was part of an HBO story. It was a pleasure to do that. So, what else you want to talk about? Talk about the Celtics?
Do we have any questions?
The Patriots?
Oh, that's not fair. That's not fair. Are there any questions?
There's a young man there.
Well, there's lots of race talk in your book, of course, as we heard here tonight. But some things that disappoint me.
What?
You talk about Bobby Kennedy being upset. You were there on scene when it happened.
What's it?
Bobby Kennedy.
Oh, yeah.
You were on the scene. And
Yes, I
in
was.
your book, you chalk it up to right-wingers and white supremacists. We know that's not true. We know it's absolutely not true. Malcolm X, you lump in with the assassination of Martin Luther King and Medgar Evers, and also you toss it into the race category. We know that Malcolm X was gunned down by people associated with the Nation of Islam, so that's not a race case. Sammy Davis Jr., you've got him, and you talk about the rumor that was floating around on how he lost his eye. A bunch of thugs didn't like the fact that he was dating a white woman, and they took him out and they beat him and he lost his eye. It's well documented that he lost his eye in a traffic accident in 1954. No mention of this in your book. But most odd of all, most curious of all perhaps, is when you talk about when you're on a set, a movie set, and sitting around with white crew members, some things you just don't want to talk about. You don't want to raise the question of maybe O.J. didn't kill those two people. Maybe somebody else did.
Which one do you want?
Don't tell me that you actually believe that O.J. possibly didn't kill those two people.
Well, don't go away, sir. Don't go away. Please don't. Which one do you want me to ask him first?
Take your pick.
What was the first thing you said?
First thing I do with Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby-
In your reference to
No,
white
Bobby Kennedy.
right-wingers and
No. Just
white
Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy. Let's start with that one first, okay? Now, I was a Bobby Kennedy fan. He should have been a great president. He was at the Hotel Roosevelt. We followed him across the country. He was going to be president. It was Rosie Greer, a couple of us. We followed him, and it was wonderful. He made that wonderful speech, and he made a great speech about Dr. King and all of that stuff, about what I just talked about racism and stuff. And I was sensitive to assassinations at the time, because Dr. King died, and his brother died, and Medgar Evers died, and a couple of others. So I was sensitive, but when I heard those gunshots, I turned my back and went away. Something broke in me. The person who shot Bobby Kennedy was an extremist, and that's the word you should probably use.
right-wing.
Extremists.
You said in your book.
Right wing, left wing, extremists.
Say that.
And extremists hit our headlines so badly that we can't find the truth. What we need is a common truth between yourself and myself and all of us in this room, so we can make this planet a bit better, so there are no more assassinations like that, sir. I know you're talking about stuff that is, exciting and headlining, but I never mentioned the name in my book on purpose. But there's a possibility that during the O.J. Simpson case, there is a possibility of the freebase era, that his wife, when she died, was 45 pounds, I think, and she was a subject of freebasing, hitting that glass pipe, and that there was a contract out on her by the Colombians. And what they do when they kill people is they do a Colombian necktie. And there was a true thing that the maid that was sent back to El Salvador saw 4 men in the heat of the summer with ski masks. And there was a truth that O.J. was also a victim of that drug, and others that was part of that society. Possibility that maybe Johnny Cochran chose the race card rather than bring all that up. Possibility, but not to be able to say it is anti-American.
Well, it's a nonsense theory, of course.
All right, that's your opinion, sir.
Care to respond to
What
the
else-
Sammy Davis Jr. and the Malcolm X?
What else would you like to say?
The Malcolm X, you lumped him into a racial killing when in fact we know it was Nation of Islam types who did it.
Well, I think they were doing too well. I think his thoughts, he was changing his thoughts. He was getting a lot of people behind him, and he was becoming a threat to an establishment. I think he was doing too well. And so was Dr. King.
I want to thank you so much for jumping right in with questions. For anybody else who'd like to ask questions, it looks like Mr. Gossett Jr., you are open to answering anything,
Yes,
so
anything.
come right down to the microphone.
Yes, Lou, I love your acting. I think you're
Thank you, sir.
a great actor. My name's Bill Warden.
Hi, Bill.
And I don't know too much to say. I'm just excited to be here.
Yes.
Just say hi to you. What I wanted to ask, if I can ask, if I can get her autograph before she leaves.
This lady?
And I got to get yours for sure.
Okay, we'll do that. After a while.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'll be downstairs signing some books. Go ahead.
Hi, I like your stories. You're really down to earth. You're unassuming. It's the best Ford Hall Forum I've ever heard.
Oh, wow.
Okay. How did you do against Sandy Koufax in baseball
Sandy
and
Koufax?
basketball?
Well, that's a fantasy of mine because I was very good, but Sandy Koufax at the age of 15 was still throwing a baseball 110 miles an hour.
Did you bat against him?
I closed my eyes, I grit my teeth, and I dug in and I swung and I hit a double. I don't remember hitting the ball at all. But he's probably one of the greatest athletes I've ever known. He played football, baseball, or basketball.
You got a basketball scholarship.
Incredible ball player. Incredible.
Thank you.
God bless you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Ronald Clark. I'm originally from Detroit, and I'm a student at the Harvard Extension School's journalism program. And one of the comments that you made was our stories being told on the screen. And I think over the past couple of years, you were doing documentaries of African Americans in the military.
Yes, I do.
One was, I think, of the Brave Marines. During
Montfort
World War-
Marines. Yeah.
Montfort Marines. And you did something much more extensive.
That's right.
From the Revolutionary War to today.
Absolutely.
Where did the initial inspiration come from? Did it come from your role as an officer and a gentleman, or was it due to the fact that many of the stories of the Black experience of the African diaspora were not being told?
Well, I was the one trying to get those parts. And they said, find me some parts. And so I found them some parts. I found hundreds of stories. And I still was not able to do them. Thank God for glory, but that's one story. But in the Montfort Point Marines, they were taken away from the supply, given rifles, and they had to get the Japanese out of the caves so that they put the flag up. And it's not in the movie. So now, and I got into real trouble when I talk about General Patton because my uncles were in that battalion. Two of my uncles were with General Patton, and the other two were with General MacArthur. And so I finally, and my best friend was the late George C. Scott. So he came back, my best friend, and he came back so proud of having played Patton, and he came to Lincoln Center, it was, and myself and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar were hosting the reunion between those tank battalion men, 761st Regiment, look it up, and the Jews that they rescued from Buchenwald, Auschwitz, and Dachau. It's called the Liberators. And they were emotional together. Of course, they had met each other, and they were cadavers. And so when I saw Patton, the only black guy in the movie was a valet, right? And George looked at that, and he took his Oscar, and he gave it back to the Academy. And so he was embarrassed. But that's not the point. The point is, if we're going to tell, and this is my business, once again I have to speak. If you're going to tell a story about a true event, you've got to say the truth. The truth is that those tanks, the 761st, they beat Field Marshal Rommel in North Africa with the Tuskegee Airmen, and they were Patton. They saved the British, and then he sent them to the road toward Berlin, and they beat the Panzers, and they ran out of gas, and they sent back to the headquarters for a thing called the Red Ball Express, and there was 75 tankers full of gasoline. They went 100 miles an hour, bumper to bumper. 63 of them made it. They refueled the tanks. They beat the Panzers and rescued the Jews from Buchenwald, Auschwitz, and Dachau. That's not in Patton. So somebody made a decision not to put that in there. And enough is enough. The truth has got to be the truth. And when my uncles came home, they had the ribbons. Why couldn't they put that in the movie? So you have to kind of tap them on the shoulder. They don't like it because I haven't worked on a major movie since. But I have to look at my grandchildren. I have to look at all people and tell them that's not the truth. So yeah, that's what I have to do. That's the answer. In a long way, that's why I'm sitting here. Probably I wrote the book.
And I have one more comment. In the mid-'80s, at 17, I started losing my hair.
Oh.
And I started shaving my hair as a direct result of seeing you on television. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Doug Ruffin, Boston Music Coalition. At 52, I didn't plan on losing my hair.
That doesn't mean a thing, man.
Celtics fan?
Huh?
Celtics fan?
No, I come from California, man.
I'm sorry.
Originally the Knicks, and now it's my best friends are, Kobe and those guys. But it's the Celtics and the Lakers again. The two best. The best of the West and the best of the East.
There you go. And very good. I like the way you handle hard questions. I'll just leave it at that. I wanted to ask you, telling the story, particularly in the world of new media, there were times when the movies you made, you worked with HBO, and then there's Tuskegee Airmen and other stories, true stories that were told. And stories that may have included African Americans that originally may not have been told, but new media or alternative media from the so-called mainstream are telling with no holds barred. Where do you see, when you think of actors, trying to struggle, doing independent work as it would be to get a story like that told maybe, where does the actor, studio, distribution, all the workings combine together to tell stories that you're talking about with new exhibition opportunities in the future of where movies are presented? I'd like for you to speak on.
Okay, well, if I get it, your gist, you want to know how come they don't do better movies in Hollywood? Those relevant movies should be done, right?
Right. Well, more relevant.
They're getting there. It's inching up, because now they found out that print or precious made money,
Yes.
and Slumdog Millionaire. So there's some people, there's an element that's doing that, those good movies. Not good enough for my satisfaction. I think there's a whole area, and the magic word is distribution. There's a whole brand new area now with computers and web and downloading and Facebook and all kind. I think it's a burgeoning competition now. Tyler Perry has proven this himself. By the time he's talked to Hollywood, he had $50 million in his pocket already. Now he's going to combine with Oprah, and Denzel is jumping out. So now I think we're going to have a little healthy competition.
That's what I wanted to talk about. See that the competition happens.
The healthy
stories.
competition and the new distribution is about to happen.
And just one quick
It's a
question.
brand new ballgame now.
And just one last question on that distribution. Where should actors be turning to? Young actors, young storytellers, or new storytellers?
Theater. Theater. Theater, 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 theater. They should turn to theater. That's where they learn their craft. The rest is a piece of cake. Hey, man.
How you doing, Mr. Gossett?
So far, so good, brother.
It's a pleasure hearing you speak. You're more than just an actor. You seem very well educated in all these worldly histories that you passed with us. So my question to you is, there was a mention about your foundation.
Yes, sir.
Could you explain more about that foundation and how people in the cities across America can actually satellite that foundation that you're talking about?
Well, it's at the point now, I'm trying to raise money to get funds to start one shopping center somewhere. Maybe it's going to be in Lynn. It's been offered now in New York, been offered in Washington, been offered in Atlanta, Dallas. So I want the competition to go because I want them everywhere in every major city. But I want to prove my point in one. So it might be Los Angeles because I'm in negotiation with the LA Unified School District there. They found a place for me. But if you look on your computer at E-Racism Foundation, eracismfoundation.org, you'll find a commentary on what's happening. But it seems to make sense that if it's not happening in the streets or the families that these children need to get this information on how they should act. They need to go to a place. They need to go to a synagogue. They need to go to a temple, and they need to. Their lives have to be. They have to be real tired. They have to be inundated with all this information that they should have had a long time ago on how to behave. That there really is no such thing as possible. They've already made their point. They need to be taught how to break free and be great, because they are great young people.
Yes,
Very brilliant.
yes, these cultural centers that it sounds like you're trying to create can actually draw these kids away from the criminal element.
Well, then you're a place where the criminal element can't live. If they can't live in the neighborhood, they go somewhere else.
There you go.
You know? But if they know it's lucrative, they can stay.
Thank you so much. I hope your work is a success, and I hope to be a part of
I'll
it.
go as far as I can, set it up, and I'm gonna get out of the way and let the experts do it.
Okay. All right, thanks, Lou.
Thank you. Hello, sir. How are you, sir?
I'm a little nervous.
I left my gun at home.
Well, actually, I have two questions.
Yes, sir.
The first question is, going through theater and becoming an actor in movies, who right now, with the young actors and current actors right now, that you like to watch when you're watching movies?
Oh, there's a couple of them that excite me, really. Some of them, I don't even know their names sometimes. I know Lamont Rucker. He was great in Daddy's Little Girls. He played the policeman. I know Idris Elba. He's about to explode. There's the, I forgot his name, it's an African name. Chiwetel Ejiofor, you know what I mean?
I know.
Yeah, top of the line. That man can act. And then, of course, the ladies, there are also many of them, so great. It's wonderful to see. And they can all have something to do. For Colored Girls, it's a great story. It was on stage some 30 years ago. So it took a minute for that to get into movies, thank God, so started appearing. But it's about to happen. About to get some pretty nice products on the screens and on the stage now. It's very exciting. Whoever excites me is Monique. She excites me.
My second question is the first movie I kind of saw you in when I was getting older was In the Principal with
Jim Belushi. Yeah.
How, working with him during that time, how was your experience?
I like that. You know, we shot that in the Merritt College. This is where the Black Panthers were born. Now it's kind of abandoned. They torn it down now. But the ghosts of the Black Panthers were all through there. And that was quite an experience to do that film, The Principal, with Jimmy. He's a good friend. I call him Blue Cheese. Blue Cheese.
That actually is my favorite movie with you in it.
Thank you, sir.
To start off,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lady?
Hi, my name's Amanda, and I'm a theater major at Suffolk University.
Don't do it.
Okay, I'm done. I'm just kidding. I was just wondering what your process is when it comes to preparing for like an emotional scene or just character development in general.
Well, I don't know what it is anymore. I got a lot from the actor studios, a lot from NYU and experiences from working with some great ones. But it's never the same for any part. It's a different set of circumstances. Got to get inside the character, like putting on clothes. And your instrument has to be sharp enough so that you can do what you want at a moment's notice and make it look like it's happening for the first time for these people. There's your art. And if it's movies, you got to do it 15 times in a row, make it look like it's happening for the first time. In theater, you got to do it 8 times a week. And these people have got to be convinced that you're really feeling what you're feeling 8 times a week. That's why theater is a thing. So there's your challenge. However you want to do it, subtext, push-ups, or whatever it is. Eating pickles, I don't care what it is. As long as you get your instrument, that facile, so that you can do that for the rest of your life. Got it?
Yes, thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Lou Gossett.
Hello, sweetheart. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Very glad to speak to you.
Thank you.
About 30 years ago, I was a teenager growing up in Cambridge, Mass. And we had a local theater group called Art of Culture. And I loved doing that. I did it probably about 5 years. And even after as a teenager, I continued for a couple of more years. But there really wasn't that many opportunities to, I never considered acting for a career. It wasn't until maybe 8 years later, then came the Spike Lees and the more people and there were more opportunities to act. So there's always been a little tug at my heart, oh, I never did that. I never pursued it. But anyway, this brings me to my question. How have you survived the Hollywood machine? How have you avoided the pitfalls, the ugly side of Hollywood?
Well, I didn't avoid them. I fell into them. I went for the okie doke. They tell you that you got to have a publicist and you have to work and you have to. I was exemplary. I did about almost 80 movies, and I was told by my contemporaries, Paul Newman and Brando and all those guys. And when they went out there, they got their Oscars and they had this lifestyle and they had these cars and they lived on the beach and they had these new clothes and so what I did, what they did, I did. I followed them around and finally we partied a lot. So there wasn't enough time to party. So you have to hurry up the party. So I had the champagne and the caviar. Eventually I got into good marijuana. I got that from the head of the studio. And hey, this is the way to go, man. This is success here. And I had fun. And I learned that from my uncles. You can do what you want as long as you show up Monday and do your work. That's a man. So that was the challenge, And so I did that with my buddies and stuff. And I showed up, sometimes I couldn't breathe with the cocaine in the nose, and I did all of that, I'll tell you another story about marijuana in a minute. But I did it, so I fell into those areas. But when I got famous, and I stayed home, nobody knew that. Some very sexy girls came into my home with a glass pipe. They didn't look like the girls that I was inviting. So I was flattered, and I got hooked on freebase, just like Richard Pryor. Basically, the same girls did the same thing to him. But for some reason, magically, I got out of that. I got out of that by standing in South Africa one day, looking at Robben Island, where Mandela was gotten. So they tortured him, they did all kinds of stuff. And I did more to myself than they did to him. I was doing to myself. So it fell away. So I wasn't meant to die. All those people that I wanted to be like are gone. For some reason, I'm still here to tell a story. I'm very grateful that it's not making decisions that come from between my ears anymore, but from a higher power.
I'm grateful too. Thank you.
So I was in Jamaica, and we'll close with this.
This is the marijuana story.
I was in Jamaica, and I was the one who had gone around the world. I was the expert, right? So here I am in Jamaica. They say, you want some good marijuana? Go to Kingston, Jamaica. This is way before the Rastas were famous. And they go ask a Rasta to get some ganja, and so here I am, 100 degrees, and I got a silk shirt on. That's the worst thing. And I had my money in my sock. I had just amateur. So I found a Rasta, and he looked at me and bored. He was with a big machete and the red eyes. And he said, all right. So I get in the car, and he drives me up top of Jamaica. And it's the coffee plantations up there, and it's where the ganja is. You can smell it, and there's naked children and dogs and Quonset huts. And so he pulls me inside, and it's dark, and you hear this fire with the chillums, and if you're supposed to keep this fire going, otherwise you're not a man. So I had to keep the fire going, and I took a big hit, and fire hit my chest. And I had to pass it away, and I started sweating, and I started hallucinating, and I started getting paranoid, and I knew that I was not going to live. And I got out to bright sunlight, and I got this bag they gave me, and I looked around, and they were all looking at me, and they were going to kill me. I mean, the dogs, the babies, and the guys with the... And I jumped in the car, and you know what they did? They stole my steering wheel. Now I know I can't run. I'm dead. So actually, about 25, 30 minutes later, I'm not as high, and I look around, and I realize that the steering wheel's over there. I act like I do it all along to get out and go around. That was about the end of that era.
Hello.
I threw the stuff out the window. I reached for 2 weeks. I wasn't good at it. I'm sorry, I'm just not good at it. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Michelle Magruder.
Hello, Michelle Magruder.
next time you come back to Boston, I hope you come out to Jubilee Church. You gotta do that first.
Where?
Jubilee Church, 1500 Blue Hill Avenue.
Okay.
All right? We have 3 services, so
Okay.
come out. All right? And also, one thing the question is, I see everybody talking about the past,
Yes, ma'am.
but something that I'm interested in doing a documentary later on. I hope one of these times, your family, somebody, we can collaborate about where we're going to be 10 years from now. I'm talking about Black America,
Yes.
period.
Mm-hmm.
Right, from police, from schooling, from what are we really going to look like? A lot of people are not looking at that. Everybody's
Yes.
still kind of stuck
I agree.
in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, we're preparing we must prepare
Yes, and
for the present and the future.
yes.
One of the fables, one of the fears, that fear is major. It's major. I think slavery, and it's not a popular feeling, but in slavery, I'm flattered that the men in the South had to do some research on what people would be able to withstand the heat to make the cotton industry worldwide popular. They did the research. They went to Asia. That didn't work. The American Indian didn't cooperate. The indentured servants. So he found in this dark continent a convenience of different kinds of tribes. One kind of tribe had to work in Texas and Louisiana. And right now, today, they are professional football players. That's where they all come from there. Then there was the people who could withstand humidity and heat. And he went to Sierra Leone and Senegal and Ghana. And he did his research properly. And he was proud of his slaves and his children. And his heart went out to a lot of them. And then Lincoln said, I was going to free them. He said, are you out of your mind? Because you see, I've created this industry. And that's why the war was so vicious. So that was then. This is now. We're descendants of those people. And we helped build this country. It's on our shoulders. We are owed a certain right. But we, on our side, as African Americans, have to prepare to live in that right as three-dimensional, full-blooded Americans, without resentment, without anger, without revenge, without anger. We need to come to the plate. And how do you do that? We teach our children that they deserve the right to be anything they want. We've got a president that looks like us now. Our side of the street, our neighborhoods have to be safe for somebody to come in there and invest. The black neighborhood. People want to come there and not be afraid that they're going to get shot or raped. So it's a safe place, and it used to be a safe place. We need to open up our hearts right now and do what it says in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We have to act that way. And we have to make sure that we can allay the fear of the rest of the country, that we're not out for violence, we're out to be one of many. That's all. The fear will be replaced by faith.
Okay, so very quickly, and then I'll leave it 30 seconds.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not you. So here in Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and just recently, a survey that came out today by WGCI Detroit, 72% of women are now household leaders. That's the best way.
Say it again?
Single moms. There are 72% single moms.
Yes, ma'am.
Nationwide.
I know that.
Okay, I know you know that. And especially here, Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, we are the 4th in the nation for segregation. So I see, but by another 2 years, us with redistricting and all this other stuff, gone.
I understand.
You know, so.
I understand.
So.
Yeah, but the men who think that they're so macho that they have no responsibility, they're teaching these young boys that from woman to woman to woman without being responsible. Men, that's our job. It's not the job of the president or the police. It is the job of the older men to try and get these young men to realize there's a responsibility when you father a child. And they have to come back and take care of not just the child, but the woman. Those are the levels that are taught in the shopping center, is it not? The respect for the opposite sex and passing on, each one teach one, the way it used to be. When people used to hang out in our neighborhood and listen to jazz and eat our food, and it was good, all the great people used to come to those neighborhoods. We need to create that neighborhood again. like Magic Johnson is doing. But it's got to be safe for everybody to come and go straight to the black neighborhood to have a good time. That's our responsibility.
Thank you.
I think we are through. There
Did
are
we
no
finish?
questions?
Yeah.
We are through. Well, thank you all so much, and
Thank
we'll
you.
be available to sign books.